Great, recording has started. Good morning and welcome. Again, for those of you who just recently joined us, my name is Casey Beck, and I am the Grant Program Coordinator here at the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. You are probably tuned into this meeting today to learn a little bit more about the Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Grant Program. This is the application webinar. Our application opened up earlier this week. And hopefully you're tuned in to learn a little bit more about the application process, as well as what it means to be an early adopter as one of the 23 identified counties outlined in House Bill 5204. This webinar is being recorded, so feel free to watch this again and again as much as your heart desires, as well as to share it with your colleagues should they have not been able to tune in today. But for the sake of time, we will go ahead and hop into it. So a quick overview, House Bill 4002 was signed into law, just last week, April 1st. And what that bill does is a lot of things. It recriminalizes possession and delivery of controlled substances as a drug enforcement misdemeanor, along with a myriad of other changes and new programs as they relate to the state's addiction crisis. As part of the bill, the Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Program was established at the CJC under the existing Impacts Grant Review Committee. And if you aren't familiar with Impacts, that's the Improving People's Access to Community-Based Treatments, Supports, and Services. It's such a mouthful, but we're very grateful for good acronyms here at the government. So Impacts it is, and I manage that grant as well. The Grant Review Committee are the body of decision makers for Impacts Grant, as well as this new behavioral health deflection program. And here at the CJC, we are already in acronym world, so it is now the BHD program, which you might hear me saying throughout this presentation today. But what the BHD program and grant does is basically we'll be pushing funding and to become available to Oregon's counties and federally recognized tribal governments to establish deflection programs, should they choose to do so. It is an optional opportunity. House Bill 5204, which was the accompanying funding bill to House Bill 4002, appropriated a total of $20,708,200 to the BHD program, as well as instructed the CJC on very specific early access timeline for 23 identified counties, which is why you all are here today. I'm now going to provide a very quick overview of BHD grant as it's outlined in the bill, and then the differences between these early adopters and the standard BHD grant. So as an overview, deflection program here means a collaborative program between law enforcement agencies and behavioral health entities that assist individuals who may have substance use disorder, another behavioral health disorder, or co-occurring disorders to create community-based pathways to treatment, recovery support services, housing, case management, and other services. As I mentioned, there's about a little over $20 million appropriated to this as a whole. In terms of eligibility, in order to be eligible for this grant, you must be one of Oregon's 36 counties or one of Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribal governments. You must coordinate the development and administration of the deflection program with all partners outlined in the bill, or be in the process of planning to do so. It must be coordinated by or in consultation with a community mental health program, a local mental health authority, or a federally recognized tribal government. You've got to have a coordinator, and you must manage and track grant program funds, just like any other CJC grant, if you are familiar. So there's two tracks here. For those of you tuned in today, you are on the left side. You are a representative of one of the 23 identified counties, and these were outlined in House Bill 5204, and you are eligible to access 50% of your formula funding early as a planning grant. This means that you do not have to have everything figured out, but you will have access to money early in order to, get your planning process underway. Right. And then there will be a short form application. As I mentioned, it was opened earlier this week, and that will be open for 2 weeks total. The project period, you can backdate eligible expenses to April 1st, and the project period is set to end June 30th of 2025. And you'll notice that that's a lot of money to get out and then spend, before the end of the biennium. But you will receive that 50% of your formula funding by June of this year. In comparison, the standard behavioral health deflection program is open to everyone. So 36 counties, 9 federally recognized tribal governments. It's a planning grant or an operational grant, whereas the early adopters is planning only. The standard BHD program is going through a standard request for grant proposals process. It's quite a bit lengthier in time and also substance. There's a lot more that we will be asking of from those applicants to determine what their deflection programs will look like, who all is involved, and to what extent planning has already occurred. That project period is slightly shorter. So that will be just 1 calendar year, July 1st of this year through June 30th of next year. And money will be out to those folks by October of 2024. So it's worth noting that early adopters on this call, you might be accessing 50% of your funding now early. However, you're still eligible to receive the remaining 50% of your formula funding as part of that standard BHD process. You will be required, though, to go through that standard process. So it will not be another quick and easy short form application like maybe you have seen already or that you will see today. And that's kind of the nuanced differences there. I thought it'd be helpful to show some visual timelines, though, to orient you to how these play against each other. So here, you all are the yellow timeline at the top, and the standard BHD program is the blue timeline at the bottom. So we are in that first chunk of the short form application. And then money will be out, as you can see, by June. Meanwhile, the RFGP application for the standard BHD process will be opening up late May, and then that will be due towards the end of June. Money will be out by the end of September, so before October of 2024. Breaking that down in a little bit more detail, this is your timeline, the early adopters. So April 1st was day 0. I think I forgot to mention, but many of you probably know, we have 60 days from the day the governor signed the bill to get funding out, the 50% of formula funding out to you all. So day 0 was April 1st when the bill was signed. The Grant Review Committee for Impacts met on April 2nd to review the formula funding table, decide upon a set-aside amount for tribes, decide upon a set-aside amount for evaluation efforts, and I'll get into the details of that in terms of actual money available shortly. The short form application opened this week on April 9th. And you all are here as part of the webinar, so that's the April 11th date you see. And in less than 2 weeks, the short form application closes on April 23rd. My staff here at CJC will begin our staff review and contract prep the very next day. And we will be getting contracts sent to you all for signature by May 3rd. And then it's a tight turnaround. We understand that each county has its own process in terms of contracting. However, we're hoping that, in order to access these funds, you all are able to turn those contracts around pretty quickly. So we are asking that those are due May 23rd. And then when they're back in our hands, as soon as they're back in our hands, so if you get it in before May 23rd, we will be passing it off sooner. But as soon as it's back in our hands, we will be passing it off to the Oregon Department of Administrative Services, so that they may begin processing the disbursement. And then that money out date is on May 29th, so that we can have this all wrapped up by day 60, which is May 31st. But do know if your county needs extra time to, do the contracting process, go through a LIPSIC, have commissioners on board, et cetera, we understand. But that will not be, it will not affect the 60 days. So as part of our process, having the contract in your hands, deferring it to the county process is, hey, we give you 3 weeks to get it back. So you don't have to, I guess, worry about getting in trouble or losing the money should you not get it back by that date. But I think just for sake of our timeline and process here, these are the dates that we've assigned. All right. So quick funding overview. Out of the 20 million and change, 10% of that was set aside for tribal governments, and then 150,000 of that was set aside for evaluation efforts. The rest of it, $18,487,381, is going to counties, and this is the final funding table. You guys probably all seen iterations of this. It's also published to our website. And we will be making it available to you in the application, as you'll see shortly. But you are eligible to receive 50% of what is shown on this slide for your county as part of this early adopter process. Next up will be an application walkthrough, but I thought I would pause for questions briefly to see if there are any specific questions about timelines or anything that I've gone over so far. Yes, I see Sheriff McGill's hand raised. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly.
Sheriff McGill here. I just had a question on so for those of us that were the adopters, we can make application and receive 50% of it. But I guess my question is do we need to go through the longer process that you put on for the second 50%?
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a question in the chat. Could you go back to the 50% slide? So I don't know if that's maybe the formula funding table slide.
Yeah, was it this slide by chance? Sorry, I missed that chat.
Yes, Ryan says yes.
Great, and I see another hand raised. Sorry, it's a little bit blind in presenter mode here.
Looks like Trent Wilson.
Hi, thank you, Trent from Clackamas County. My question is about the standard implementation and the money arriving, I think you said in October.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to go back and look at the bill. My memory is that the possession charge the misdemeanor becomes effective in September.
September 1st, that's correct.
So I was curious on why the implementation funds would be available a month after the implementation of the misdemeanor. And if that gap has been taken into consideration, it just was curious to me that, that we would have a month without the ability to implement the program.
Yeah, no, understood. I mean, as early adopters, you will have funding, to begin planning and implementation of your program. The reason for that 1 month lag is really process. So a standard request for grant proposals process is open for 45 days. There's a protest period of a minimum of 14 business days that's involved. The grant review committee has to get together to review potentially 45 applications. It's quite a lengthy process. So for the remaining 50% of your funding, it will only be until October to get that. However, for the the other folks, the other 13 counties and 9 federally recognized tribal governments, they are able to backdate their expenses to that July 1st date. So, should they have expenses that go towards deflection and, they don't get their money, they can basically request for reimbursement. But the reason for that 1 month lag is just simply due to the lengthy process. Getting something out within 6 months is incredibly fast. So 60 days is whiplash worthy.
Oh, fully appreciate that. And thanks for your quick work on that. I just want to confirm, I thought I heard you say earlier that this early adoption money can only be used for planning. And the remaining 50%, that's what could be used for implementation. So
Yeah,
that's where I'm confused.
Yeah, so as far as eligible expenses go for this work, I mean, it's a planning grant. That's what the term that we are using in order to get this funding out quickly and to not have to go through the larger process. That some folks in this early adopter list already have deflection programs running. So they won't necessarily need to plan, and this money can be used for deflection purposes and implementation. It's just, I guess, called a planning grant, and as part of, having everyone go through a planning grant before going through a larger process, it gives us an opportunity to let you all flag at the time at which you're ready to turn operational. So I'm sorry if that was definitely miscommunicated, but yeah.
No,
so
that's the clarification I needed. Thank you so much.
Holly, I do see you and see your hand up.
Hi, good to see you. So as an impacts grantee for the other impacts grant, I have two questions. How does this overlap, if at all? Are there two separate reporting requirements? Are the applications going to remain completely separate? They're basically two separate programs under one grant program. Is that how I should understand it?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And then my second question is what criteria are you using to evaluate the short form applications? Because these aren't really competitive grants in the sense that we've already been allocated the funding. So we're really just going through this process to get the funding. I love the application, so thank you very much. This is very much in line with how Impacts Grant has operated. For those of you that have not been part of an Impacts Grant, it's a very easy process. Group very easy to work with, and this application is very much in line with how I've experienced impacts in the past. So thank you for that. But it's very broad and very short, and I'm just like, are there things that you're going to be looking for that would exclude somebody from being able to get their allocated funding through that process?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Holly. So I think it may become a little bit more clear when I walk through it, but to answer your question, we're looking for some sort of substance that will give us an idea of what you all are doing or what you plan to do. The eligibility, for this early access money, you all are eligible. You were identified in House Bill 5204. We are legislatively mandated to get you 50% of your formula funding by that May 31st date. So this is basically, it's not a checkbox because we are asking you to, give some sort of narrative as to what your plan is, to give us an idea of, maybe when you might become operational, to identify a couple of people so that we're able to go back to the legislature and the governor to be like, you asked this money to go out, it went out, and here are what the 23 early adopters are considering doing or are doing. And we totally understand if that plan changes a dozen times. We totally understand if those contacts, the coordinator, the other folks that you identify change as well. We ask that you keep us up to date on those changes. But in terms of eligibility requirements to get this, we ask for a completed short form application before that date, before the April 23rd due date. And really, I can imagine my colleague Avery and I, the ones who will be reviewing these applications, will be calling you if we have questions that maybe something is like blatantly unclear, or if something seems very, ineligible, like you're throwing a pizza party for a whole bunch of, corrections officers. It's like, wait a minute, that's not maybe deflection work. So just stuff like that. Does that answer your question, Holly?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Cool.
And then we have a question
sorry.
in the chat. Is this planned to be a one-time funding cap?
Okay, good question. So it is a one-time appropriation at this time, but the legislature kind of laid out, you know, some evaluation that's going to be happening over the next year, 18 months. And I think the intent is to refund deflection at a level, I guess, yet to be determined. But for now, yes, one-time funding. I do not believe it will stay that way. All right, for sake of time, I'm going to start going through application walkthrough. There will be more time at the end for questions. This is really going to be kind of like just walking through the application, especially for you counties who maybe aren't as familiar with CJC grants. So when you get access to the application via either the link that Avery included in the email out to 23 identified counties, this is the landing page. It basically says Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Program. If you are familiar with CJC grants and you have applied for a CJC grant in the past, it's very likely you have login credentials already. If that's the case, you can click apply or log in, and you will be met with a login screen like this where you enter your credentials. There's also a forgot your password, you know, button there at the bottom just above login. However, if you are brand new to CJC grants, or maybe you do not have login credentials, you will be prompted to register. And here we will ask for first name, last name, email, a strong password, 8 characters, an uppercase letter, lowercase letter, a number, a special character, etc., and a verification that you are indeed not a robot before creating an account. If you are a brand new user going through this registration process, where you land, there will likely be a banner at the top saying your email address has not been verified. We ask that you go ahead and verify that email address to make sure that you are receiving communications from SM Apply. You'll do so by sending send verification link. You will receive an email from basically the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission grants at SM Apply, you know, asking you to click another link to verify an email, and it will bring you back here full circle, everything verified and good to go. So once you're in, you don't have a scary banner saying that you're not verified. This is what it will look like. The instructions you can access by clicking here. They're pretty brief. It just says, hey, you know, by being part of this grant application opportunity, you are one of these 23 identified counties. There's helpful links here that I've identified. The formula funding table is that first one. The House Bill 5204, you know, that is laying out all of the counties that are eligible is that second one. And you are also able to add collaborators. This is helpful, especially if you're working on a team of individuals, you know, to complete an application together. And so you would do so by clicking the Add Collaborators button. A pop-up window would arise that looks like this. You can enter in 1 email address, 5 email addresses, select whether or not you want that collaborator to be able to view and edit this application or view only. And then I think it's always helpful that to include some sort of message, you know, like, hey, click this link to get the collaborator or something to the effect, because this email is not coming from you per se, it will be coming from the system. So give your colleagues a heads up that you have invited them to be a collaborator. And if you have any issues with this, I will ask you to contact Avery, our grant liaison, who can help you do it on the back end too. But it's a fairly simple process. Once you're back here, you basically begin the application. There are 3 components: a cover sheet, part 1, which includes acknowledgements, and part 2, which includes questions. For that cover sheet bit, the first thing you'll be asked to do is select your county from the list of 23 identified counties using this drop-down menu here. You will then be asked to list the primary applicant contact. I use my dog for almost all of these examples, so that's why that's here. But just know that this is the individual that the CJC will be contacting regarding the application. Once you've submitted, and maybe I have a question about a particular, part, maybe your state employer identification number isn't coming up in our system, like something like that. This is the person that we will be going to for those questions mostly. And then the other person, I guess more specific to that state employer identification number, is the fiscal contact. Note that the legal name of the organization receiving payment, that state employer identification number, and an accurate street address are critical here to get your program set up with the Oregon Department of Administrative Services to receive payment. It's just the way the state works, but make sure that these are super, super clear. And then you'll be asked if you would prefer to receive payment via direct deposit or via a mailed check. Note that mail does take a little bit longer, whereas the direct deposit can be released, instantaneously by DAS. So just know that it, might take a couple extra days should you choose check, but that is definitely an option. Then at the bottom here, you'll note two different options. You may save and continue editing with the button on the left. This also allows you to save, completely exit the application, close your computer, take a vacation, come back, whatever you need to do. You are able to return to your application, later. You don't have to complete it in one setting. But I do recommend, saving as you go through. Otherwise, you can mark this task as complete. Note that you are still able to reopen it and edit it before submission. So no qualms there. The second part here is a list of acknowledgements. I'm going to bring them back up here on a slide so they're a little bit easier to read. But as a recipient of this grant, especially this early adopter planning grant, you will be required to submit a proposed budget projection sheet for this grant in July, just kind of giving the CJC an idea of where this 50% funding is actually going towards. You'll be required to report on expenditures in July, and then on a quarterly basis thereafter. You will be required to report on program progress in July in a narrative form, and then on a semi-annual or every 6 months basis thereafter. You will be required to prioritize the establishment of a program coordinator responsible for the duties outlined in House Bill 4002. So again, with the caveat that we know that many of you are just getting started in this process and you might not have, someone identified or locked down, but you will be, prioritizing your efforts to establish a program coordinator, as that is a requirement for the standard BHD grant to have a coordinator absolutely on board. You'll be required to coordinate with the following partners on the development and administration of a deflection program: your DA, a law enforcement agency, a community mental health program, and a provider from a burn. You'll be required to cooperate with the CJC and our technical assistance providers, who are the lovely folks at the Oregon Health and Science University, Portland State University School of Public Health. If you are familiar with impacts, you are familiar with their work, but they're a small team and they help with technical assistance in data reporting. And I see Sarah's online, so thanks for waving, Sarah. And so you will be required to cooperate with us and those folks for the purposes of establishing statewide data collection system for deflection programs. And you will be required to submit a separate application, meeting all the requirements set forth in House Bill 4002 during that regular standard behavioral health deflection application period, that blue timeline I showed you earlier that was on the bottom. Should you be interested in receiving the remaining 50% of your county's formula funding. So once you have read through all those, we ask that you would select that little box there to acknowledge, and then you may move on. The last part 2, is several questions. You'll be asked to describe your county's deflection program or your tentative plan to implement a deflection program. Here, we are looking for clarity and definitely quality over quantity. So you'll notice that there is a word limit of 500 words. That's about 1 page typed, if you were, throwing it into Microsoft Word. It does not have to be a thesis or something eloquently written. We are looking for just clear substance as to what it is you are doing or what it is you are planning to do. We want to really understand where your county is in terms of in the process of implementing a deflection program. So if you are planning, how are you doing so? Who's involved? Do you have an idea of what goals your jurisdiction has for deflection? Do you have an idea of your timelines? And again, I just want to flag that we understand that your plan can and likely will change along the way. So those changes are expected. Also, with the program coordinator and other partners involved, we get it. That's the beauty of a planning grant. It's flexible, and we just want to be able to work with you all to get these programs up and running. But we understand that things can change, and we just ask that you keep us in the loop. So the second parts here is, has your county identified a program coordinator as specified in House Bill 4002? And then at this time, when does your county estimate it will begin operating a deflection program? By selecting yes for that question 2 here, some skip logic will bring you to another question asking you to identify the name of that individual who is going to be the coordinator, the organization that they work for, and their email address. Again, we acknowledge it can change. Just please keep us in the loop if it does. If you select no here, you will still be prompted to identify at least what agency or organization has been, kind of tasked with getting a coordinator together. Or if you don't have that, to give some sort of explanation as to what efforts are underway to make that determination as to which agency or organization will be responsible for getting that coordinator together. And then for the month and year, this is really just a best guess, but it also helps if you are a program with, or excuse me, a county with an existing deflection work of some sort. When did your program start? Was it back in 2013, for instance, in November? This is going to really immensely help our data collection practices to figure out when programs actually get on board to become operational. And again, we're using that behavioral health deflection standard longer process to give you all an opportunity to say, yeah, hey, we're going to turn this operational now, and we think that we're going to roll this out in December of 2024 or February of 2025. So that's another flag for us, but this is the first opportunity to do so. Give your best guess as to when you might think, the ball is actually rolling. We'll then ask you to identify the local partners that are currently involved with development and or administration of your county's deflection program. Just check all that apply, and then indicate the involved organizations. And then this last question here, at this time, does your county anticipate, going through the other process to get the remaining 50% of their money? This is another flag for staff here at the CJC to make sure that, you're on our short list of people that we want to follow up with. We want to make sure we're providing you technical assistance, that you are ready for that process. So this can change. This is not a you said no, so now you're ineligible. But do know that this is a flag for us to be like, oh yeah, there they are. They're interested. This is their planning part, but like they are interested in that other stuff. So as you're making your way through the application, you're saving, you're exiting, you're logging back into edit, you're going to notice this left panel have like different status change updates. These half filled circles means that those portions of your application are underway or in progress. The one with the green check mark in the middle there means it is complete. So I marked it as complete as I was going through it. So at the time of this screenshot, you'll see, hey, I had my cover sheet and my part 2 were still in progress, but I had completed the part 1 acknowledgements, and that blue taskbar at the bottom of that panel shows I have 1 of the 3 required tasks complete. So it just gives you a good visual of where you're at. Wanted to also point out, if you mark something as complete, such as I did for this part 1, and you want to go back in and edit it, you can do so. So the way you would go about doing that is by getting to these 3 dots at the top right of whatever task you're on. By clicking those 3 dots, you get a little menu that opens that says, hey, do you want to download this? Do you want to reset it and start anew? Or do you want to edit it? So editing it just reopens it. You will be asked to mark as complete again. It will go back into that, in progress status. But otherwise, you're also, able to download it should you be interested in doing so, or scrap it completely, start from a clean blank slate. Once all 3 things are complete and that blue taskbar is happy and full, you have kind of 3 options. You can go back in, edit it all again, tinker, or you can click the review button, which will bring you to this screen. And it's basically kind of just a long, concise way of looking at your application as a whole. There's a handy button here in the orange box that says download, should you be interested in downloading it in PDF form to have for your records. Otherwise, you can go back to the application and keep tinkering or submit. The submit your application button is also handily on this page, under that green button up there. Once you've submitted, you will see green check marks for all tasks and a submitted button. And you will also receive a confirmation email upon submission of your application. Do note that it will come from a no reply email by SM Apply. So check your junk folders if you don't see it soon. But I mean, for instance, I submitted this at 4:01 p.m. on April 5th, and I got an email within the same minute. So you should expect it to be very soon. But I guess before I open it back up for more questions, just kind of wanted to talk about roles. I am the Behavioral Health Deflection Grant Program Coordinator, Casey Beck. That's my email there on the bottom. If you have questions about the grant as a whole, please reach out to me. My amazing colleague Avery is the grant liaison. She's one waving right now. Thank you, Avery. If you have a question about the actual application, or you are needing help troubleshooting something within SurveyMonkey Apply, you need help adding a collaborator, you need to reopen something, she's your girl. So please reach out to Avery with any application specific questions. All right, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and open it back up for questions here. Yes, Sheriff Miguel.
Thanks for the presentation there. That was helpful. I do have a question, and I don't know how it affects our applications, and this may be something that you cannot answer, but we all know that regionalization and, combining our resources is super beneficial, especially with us here in the Columbia Gorge. And we want to combine Hood River, Wasco, and Gillum County into this process under one one program, because we don't have any programs here. How do we fill our applications out so we can combine, make that a regionalized process? How does that work?
That's
Or
a
is
great
it even,
question.
or can we even do that? Because I can't, in Wasco County, the money won't, there's no way, it's a one-time cap, it won't go very far. We wouldn't be able to hardly have full implementation of any kind of a program, or if we did, it would be very, very limited. But by combining our resources with 2 other counties, we can develop a pretty robust deflection program here, based on our region.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Sheriff. Thank you for asking it. Um, I believe that, is a totally eligible thing to do. But you're right. I'm realizing that our application from that drop-down menu, selecting one single county is not an easy way to note that. So I think I will need to maybe make an edit to the application and get back to you as to what that change was. Can also, send out an email to everyone should other jurisdictions be doing some sort of combination method. But yeah, from that drop-down menu, that would not be helpful. So I think we need some sort of consortium checkbox and just a quick like, hey, who are the folks involved that way.
Yeah, that'd be really great, because we're looking at some pretty positive things here, but we can't do it by ourselves. And and we're kind of in a unique position, and not to get too far in the weeds and take everybody's time up, but our CMHP, of course, that's a requirement. The burn, it's all under one roof, and that's already regionalized under Chapter 190. So it covers Hood River and Wasco County anyway. So we're kind of regionalized to start with, and then this can kind of throw a monkey wrench in it. But if that could be adjusted on your end, then we could say we're working on a regionalized program and include those other counties in our narrative or something like that, or each of our narratives. That would be super helpful.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do not see a reason that you would need to complete 3 separate applications to talk about collaboration. So I will,
That'd be
yeah,
great.
I will be meeting with my team to discuss how we can implement that for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. Ryan, I see your hands up next.
I do. Are you the person to, in much like the Sheriff McGill stated, I don't want to get down in the weeds with what me and my sheriff have been communicating about. But are you the person or the point of contact that if we want to kind of talk about what we're thinking to use the funds for, to say if that's appropriate or if there's a way that we can do that? Should we be contacting you?
Yeah, so grant, like overall, I'm your girl. However, in terms of, what's appropriate and what's not, I might be coming back with a very blanketed response. And what that is basically House Bill 4002 gives that decision power to the counties for you all to decide what's appropriate, who is eligible, how you're going to be implementing this. And at this time, the CJC does not have best practices or standards or specific eligibility requirements for like an actual program. So I would say your best guidance would actually be the bill itself. To see, what feels good. I also, might suggest talking to counties who are already doing this work. I know Marion County has, a program, so maybe reaching out to them. And I also am aware of a cool symposium that's happening on May 9th, OACP and ODAA and several other DPSST throwing it together to talk about their training and implementation suggestions. But the CJC is solely tasked with administering the grant at this time, with standards and best practices to be established a year to 18 months from now. So I don't think I would be able to provide much guidance as to what's appropriate, what's not. I would say, pizza parties are off the list, but other than that, it's really up to you all at this time.
Thank you.
And we have a question in the chat. Can our county's CMHP and partial burn recipient be the same person, unrequired participants?
Yeah, if they are indeed the same person, that makes sense to me. And for that specific part in the application, we ask that you're mostly just identifying the organization or agency. If you want to add the person in there too, that could be helpful, but just at a very high level. Oh, okay, cool. I'm in the chat now so I can see Sherry's question. Yeah, so can you clarify the date we can backdate early adopter funding? Yes, yeah, no, thank you so much for Sherry. So as the 23 identified counties, you early adopter folks, April 1st is your date. So April 1st of 2024 through June 30th of 2025. That is your project period. The standard timeline for the other folks who are not on this call, the 13 counties who did not choose to be early adopters, their program start date is that July 1st date that I mentioned. I think it's also worth noting that, the planning grant is unique. We haven't really done many of these here at the CJC. It's just a way we can get this money out to you all quickly so that you all can begin doing your work. But I think it's worth noting that legislative intent is that you won't be planning forever. So by June 30th of next year, hopefully you will have come up with a plan, or maybe this isn't going to work out for your county after all. You spent the time planning, you said, you know what, after all this work, we're not interested in setting up a deflection program. That's okay. That's still valuable time spent planning and, having those conversations and getting those partners together around a table. We'd ask if that were the case, should there be any funds that you didn't use, we'd ask that you return them at that time. But to be eligible, I guess in the long-term thing, we want you on a track of what this going to look like in terms of actually getting an operational program up and running. So planning for now, just know it's not going to be, if this is to be refunded in the 25-27 biennium, it's probably not going to be more planning at that time. At least that's our take currently. Are there any other questions at this time? All right. Well, I will drop my email, and Avery, if you could do the same in the chat here, just so you all have it at your hand. But we will also be posting this webinar, to our website. We'll distribute a link. But please know that this is new territory for everyone in terms of navigation. We understand that, we're learning right alongside you, but we're also here to help in any way we can. I don't want you to feel alone or totally daunted by this task. We hope that the short form application is straightforward and intuitive, but please reach out to Avery if you have any specific application questions. And I really look forward to working with all of you over the coming year. So thank you for tuning in today.